Rain hammered against the glass walls of Silverline Global headquarters in downtown Houston, while most employees rushed home before the storm flooded the streets. Only the cleaning staff remained behind, moving silently through polished hallways that smelled of expensive perfume and exhaustion. Naomi Carter pushed her janitorial cart carefully across the executive floor, her shoes squeaking softly against marble tiles that cost more than her yearly rent. The building always felt colder at night, not because of the air conditioning, because silence made powerful places feel dangerous. Naomi adjusted the sleeves of her faded blue uniform and checked the folded towels resting on her cart. Her shift should have ended an hour earlier, but one of the supervisors stopped her near the elevators with nervous eyes. "Take these upstairs," the woman whispered, "to Mr. Blackwood's private suite, right now." Ethan Blackwood. Even hearing his name tightened Naomi's stomach. Every employee at Silverline knew him, the billionaire CEO with the icy stare, the man newspapers called America's youngest ruthless corporate titan, 40 years old. Former Navy intelligence contractor, cold under pressure, impossible to impress. Untouchable. Naomi swallowed hard and walked toward the private executive corridor where ordinary staff rarely entered. She stopped outside a dark walnut door with a brass plate that simply read, "Private." Her knuckles trembled slightly before she knocked. No answer. She tried again. "Sir?" "Fresh towels from housekeeping." The lock clicked. The door opened slowly. Warm amber light spilled into the hallway, carrying the faint scent of whiskey and cedarwood cologne. Naomi stepped inside carefully, keeping her eyes lowered. The suite looked more like a luxury penthouse than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Houston skyline where lightning flashed across storm clouds. A leather couch sat near a fireplace. Jackets hung neatly beside military commendation plaques. Then she saw him. Ethan Blackwood stood beside the bar counter, loosening the cufflinks of his white dress shirt. Tall, broad shoulders, sharp jawline, dark hair slightly damp from rain. His presence filled the room without effort. He looked at Naomi once. That single glance made her pulse stumble. "What is it?" he asked. His voice remained calm but not warm. Naomi crossed the room quietly and placed the towels beside the bathroom entrance. "Fresh towels, sir." Ethan did not thank her. Instead, his gaze stayed fixed on her face like he was studying something unfamiliar. Naomi felt exposed beneath that stare. "If that's all," she said softly, "I'll leave now." She turned toward the door. Ethan moved first. Not aggressively, not violently, just fast enough to stand between her and the exit. Naomi stopped immediately. Her throat tightened. "Wait," Ethan said. Naomi gripped the edge of her apron. "Sir, please." Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly. "Why are you nervous?" "I'm not nervous." The lie escaped too quickly. Lightning flashed outside again. Ethan leaned one shoulder against the door casually, but his size still blocked her escape completely. "You people usually come into executive suites wanting something," he said flatly. "Money, attention, connections." Naomi blinked in confusion. "No, sir." Ethan stepped closer. "Then why are you shaking?" Naomi hated how easily he noticed. Her life had trained her to recognize dangerous situations quickly. Men with power rarely heard the word no, especially when poor women stood alone in private rooms. She lowered her eyes. "I just want to leave." Ethan studied her silently. Something unreadable passed through his expression. Then he asked quietly, "How much do you need?" Naomi looked up slowly. "Sir?" "Everybody needs something," Ethan said. "What's your number?" The question landed like humiliation. Naomi's face burned. Pride rose inside her immediately, then reality crushed it. Her mother's funeral bill sat unpaid. The hospital debt collector had called 3 times that week. Her landlord threatened eviction 2 days earlier, and her mother was already gone. Naomi's chest tightened painfully. She stared at the expensive carpet beneath her shoes and whispered, "I need $50,000. Silence. Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly. Naomi forced herself to continue before shame destroyed her courage. "My mother passed away last week," she said quietly. "I need to bury her properly." The storm outside softened briefly. Ethan's face remained controlled, but the atmosphere changed somehow. Not softer, just heavier. You have a bank account? He asked. Naomi nodded carefully. Ethan pulled out his phone and entered numbers with effortless indifference. Money clearly meant nothing to him. A notification buzzed seconds later inside Naomi's pocket. Her breath caught. $50,000. Transferred instantly. Naomi stared at him in disbelief. Why? She whispered. Ethan looked at her directly. Because now I know the truth, he said. Naomi did not understand what that meant. Before she could ask, Ethan stepped closer again, close enough for her heartbeat to lose rhythm. Look at me, dear, he said quietly. Against her better judgment, Naomi obeyed. For several long seconds, Ethan simply watched her. The exhaustion beneath her beauty. The quiet grief hidden behind tired brown eyes. The stubborn dignity poverty had failed to destroy. Then his hand touched her face, warm, firm. Naomi trembled, and when Ethan kissed her, the storm outside swallowed the sound of every terrible decision waiting to happen. The next morning arrived grey and heavy over Houston. Rainwater still clung to the skyscraper windows like the city itself had cried all night. Naomi Carter woke suddenly beneath silk sheets that did not belong to her life. For one confused second, she forgot where she was. Then reality returned all at once. The executive suite. Ethan Blackwood. Her mother's funeral money. The kiss. Everything. Naomi sat upright quickly, clutching the sheet against her chest as shame flooded through her body like heat. The room smelled faintly of expensive cologne and coffee. Across the suite, Ethan stood near the windows, already dressed in a charcoal suit. Calm, perfect, untouched by regret, as if the night had meant nothing. He held a cup of black coffee in one hand while scrolling through emails on his phone. You're awake, he said without turning. Naomi swallowed hard. I should go. Ethan finally looked at her. His face revealed nothing. Drink this first. He placed a glass of water and a small packet of pills beside the bed. Naomi stared at them nervously. What are they? Medicine, Ethan replied simply. No explanation, no comfort, just another order. Naomi's stomach tightened. She thought about refusing. Then she remembered who controlled this room, who controlled the money already sitting inside her bank account. Slowly, she swallowed the pills. Ethan watched carefully. Then he nodded once. Good. The coldness in his tone hurt more than Naomi expected. Not because she wanted tenderness, because she realized she had become a transaction before sunrise. Ethan returned to his phone. You understand something clearly, he said. Last night changes nothing. Naomi forced herself to remain steady. I know. I don't tolerate emotional attachment, Ethan continued. No drama, no public scenes, no fantasies. Each sentence landed harder. Naomi looked away quickly before her expression betrayed anything. You don't have to worry, she whispered. I won't bother you again. Ethan studied her face briefly. Something flickered behind his eyes, then disappeared. Good, he said. Naomi dressed quietly inside the bathroom afterward. Her cleaning uniform suddenly felt smaller than before, like the fabric itself remembered humiliation. When she finally stepped into the hallway, her legs trembled beneath her. But she refused to cry. Not inside Silverline Global. Not where cameras existed. Not where powerful men survived by pretending emotions were weakness. Outside the building, morning traffic crawled through flooded Houston streets, while Naomi sat alone near the employee entrance. Her phone buzzed again. Bank confirmation, $50,000, enough to bury her mother with dignity. Relief hit first. Then shame followed immediately afterward. Naomi closed her eyes tightly. This money is for Mom, she whispered to herself. Only for Mom. The words helped her breathe again. 3 hours later, Ethan Blackwood sat inside the executive boardroom, leading a billion-dollar acquisition meeting without a single visible crack in his composure. Executives listened carefully while he dismantled financial projections with surgical precision. Nobody would guess he had spent the night with a cleaning employee. Only one man noticed the difference. Marcus Reed, Ethan's longtime executive assistant and former Marine intelligence officer. Marcus stood beside the presentation screen, holding a tablet while studying Ethan carefully. After the meeting ended, Marcus closed the boardroom doors quietly. Something happened last night, he said. Ethan continued reviewing documents. You're getting too observant, Marcus smirked faintly. Comes with surviving Afghanistan. Ethan finally looked up. Say what you want to say. Marcus hesitated briefly. The funeral arrangements for Naomi Carter were approved this morning. Ethan's expression remained unreadable. And? She purchased burial space at Blackwood Memorial Gardens. Silence. Then Ethan leaned back slowly. Blackwood Memorial Gardens belonged exclusively to his family. Wealthy politicians, military officers, corporate dynasties, people with old American money, and now Naomi Carter's mother would rest there too, using his money. Ethan stared toward the rain outside. Something about that fact unsettled him strangely. Later that afternoon, Naomi arrived at the cemetery carrying a folder of funeral paperwork pressed tightly against her chest. The storm clouds had finally broken apart, leaving cold wind moving through tall oak trees. Black cars lined the cemetery entrance. Men in expensive suits stood silently near a marble family mausoleum. Naomi stopped immediately, because Ethan Blackwood stood among them. Tall, controlled, distant. His presence dominated the cemetery, even surrounded by politicians and military veterans. Naomi's stomach dropped. For one terrible moment, she considered leaving, but a cemetery employee approached politely. Miss Carter? Naomi nodded carefully. This way, ma'am. We'll finalize your burial contract. As she followed him, Naomi felt Ethan's gaze shift toward her instantly, like he recognized her footsteps. The realization made her pulse stumble. She signed paperwork beside a small outdoor desk while cold wind tugged gently against her dark curls. Full legal name? The employee asked. Naomi cleared her throat softly. Naomi Renee Carter. The employee repeated it clearly while writing. Naomi Renee Carter. Across the cemetery, Ethan's head lifted sharply. Their eyes met briefly. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a cleaning employee. He was looking at a real person. A woman with a full name, a dead mother, and grief heavy enough to bend her shoulders. Naomi looked away first. The funeral itself remained painfully small. No large family, no beautiful choir, no wealthy relatives pretending they cared. Only Naomi. A pastor, 2 old neighbors, and a wooden casket lowering slowly into Texas earth. When the final prayer ended, Naomi finally broke. Not quietly, not gracefully. She collapsed onto her knees beside the grave as sobs tore through her chest with years of buried exhaustion. "Mom," she whispered brokenly, "I'm sorry." People tried comforting her gently, but Naomi barely heard them. Her mother had spent 15 years sacrificing everything for her daughter, working double nursing shifts, skipping meals, pretending stress headaches weren't dangerous. Then cancer arrived, and poverty finished what illness started. By sunset, the cemetery had mostly emptied. Naomi stood alone beside the grave holding wilted flowers, while cold evening wind moved through the trees. Then her phone rang unexpectedly. Unknown number, Naomi answered weakly. "Hello? Miss Carter?" a woman asked warmly. "This is Human Resources from Silverline Global." Naomi blinked in confusion. "Yes?" "We reviewed your business administration application submitted 6 months ago," the woman continued. "We'd like to invite you for an interview tomorrow morning." Naomi stopped breathing. For several seconds, she could only stare at the darkening cemetery. Her degree, her real qualifications, the future she thought died beside her mother. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Yes, 9 a.m. Naomi swallowed hard. "I'll be there." When the call ended, fragile hope rose carefully inside her chest for the first time in months. Maybe life wasn't completely finished. Maybe grief didn't always win. Then headlights appeared beside the cemetery entrance. A black Escalade rolled slowly toward her. The window lowered. Ethan Blackwood sat inside wearing the same unreadable expression. "Get in," he said quietly. Naomi froze. Cold wind moved through the cemetery between them, and suddenly she realized something terrifying. Ethan Blackwood had been watching her cry beside her mother's grave. Naomi stood frozen beneath the cemetery shelter while rainwater dripped steadily from the edge of the roof beside her. Ethan Blackwood waited inside the Escalade, with one hand resting calmly against the steering wheel. The silence between them felt dangerous. "I can manage," Naomi said quietly. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're standing alone in a storm, after burying your mother," he replied. "Get in the car." Naomi hesitated. Everything inside her warned against entering another private space with this man. But exhaustion won. Slowly, she climbed inside. Warm air wrapped around her immediately. The leather seats smelled expensive. The windows muted the sound of rain until the world outside felt unreal. Naomi sat carefully near the opposite door while Ethan looked straight ahead. Neither spoke for almost 5 minutes. Houston traffic crawled slowly beneath red brake lights and wet streets. Finally, Ethan reached into the side compartment beside him. He removed a clean white handkerchief. Without warning, he leaned toward Naomi and wiped rainwater gently from her cheek. Naomi flinched immediately. Not because he hurt her, because tenderness from Ethan Blackwood felt more frightening than cruelty. His hand paused. "Stay still," he said quietly. Naomi swallowed hard. "I'm fine." Ethan ignored the protest and wiped another drop of water from her skin. His fingers brushed her jaw lightly. Naomi's heartbeat stumbled unexpectedly. She shifted away quickly. The movement knocked a water bottle sideways near the cup holder. Water spilled across the console. Ethan looked down, then back at her. The atmosphere inside the vehicle changed instantly. "You always react like someone's attacking you," he said coldly. Naomi stared toward the rain outside. "Maybe life taught me to." Ethan leaned back slowly. For several seconds, he simply studied her profile. Then he spoke again. $100,000. Naomi turned sharply. "What?" "1 month," Ethan continued casually. "No complications, no expectations." The words hit harder than the rain outside. Naomi's face burned with humiliation. Something fierce rose suddenly inside her chest. Not fear, anger. She looked directly at him for the first time all evening. "Money doesn't make you superior," she said quietly. Ethan's expression hardened. Naomi continued before courage disappeared. "You think everybody can be purchased because you've never needed dignity to survive." Her voice trembled slightly. "But some of us still have it left." The driver stared forward silently. Nobody moved. Then Naomi reached for the door handle. "Stop the car," she said. Ethan blinked once. "Excuse me, I said stop the car." The Escalade slowed uncertainly beside a flooded sidewalk. Naomi opened the door immediately. Cold rain slammed against her face. Before stepping out, she looked back once. "You helped bury my mother," she whispered. "Thank you for that. But don't mistake desperation for weakness again." Then she walked away into the storm. Inside the vehicle, Ethan remained completely still. Rain blurred Naomi's figure slowly until she disappeared beyond traffic lights and flooded streets. The driver cleared his throat carefully. "Should I follow her, sir?" Ethan stared through the rain-covered window. For the first time in years, a woman had rejected him without hesitation. Not strategically, not dramatically, honestly. "No," Ethan said quietly, but his eyes stayed fixed on the empty sidewalk long after Naomi vanished. The next morning, Naomi woke with swollen eyes and a pounding headache inside her tiny apartment near East Downtown. The ceiling leaked beside the kitchen. The refrigerator barely worked, but for the first time in months, she felt something dangerous returning. Self-respect. She stood before the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her only professional outfit. Dark blazer, simple makeup, hair pulled neatly into a smooth ponytail. The woman staring back no longer looked like a defeated cleaning employee. She looked educated, capable, ready. "Today changes everything," Naomi whispered. Silverline Global looked completely different through the front entrance. Natural sunlight poured across the massive lobby, while executives crossed marble floors, carrying expensive coffee and polished confidence. Naomi forced herself to keep walking. Human resources welcomed her warmly. By noon, she officially received a junior operations analyst position. Full benefits, real salary, career opportunity. Naomi almost cried signing the paperwork. Her mother should have lived long enough to see this moment. Fate could be cruel that way. A training coordinator guided Naomi toward a conference room filled with new employees. She sat quietly near the back, taking careful notes. Then someone spoke her name, Naomi Carter. She looked up. A tall man in his early 30s smiled broadly from the doorway. Clean suit, friendly eyes, comfortable confidence. Derek Lawson, he laughed softly. University of Texas Business Program? Recognition hit instantly. Derek? He grinned wider. I knew it was you. Naomi felt genuine relief for the first time that day. Derek had been one of the few decent men during college, smart, respectful, easy to trust. You work here? She asked. Regional Strategy Department, Derek replied proudly while pulling a chair beside her. I've been here 3 years. Naomi smiled carefully. Congratulations. Derek studied her face briefly. You look tired, he said gently. The kindness almost broke her composure. Before Naomi could answer, another employee whispered loudly nearby. CEO's coming down today. Naomi's stomach tightened immediately. Derek noticed. You okay? Fine, Naomi lied quickly. The conference room doors opened moments later. Every conversation stopped. Ethan Blackwood entered wearing a dark navy suit that made him look even taller somehow. The entire room straightened instinctively. Naomi's pulse began hammering. Ethan scanned the employees casually. Then his eyes landed on her. Silence stretched. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Not anger, not surprise. Recognition. Derek noticed the tension immediately. Why's he looking at you like that? He whispered. Naomi couldn't answer. Ethan continued speaking professionally to the room while Naomi struggled to breathe normally. Then one woman near the front whispered loudly enough for several people to hear. Wait, isn't that the cleaning girl from executive maintenance? Another voice answered. Yeah. How'd she suddenly become that corporate staff? The whispers spread quickly. Naomi felt heat rising across her skin. A sharp-faced woman named Vanessa Cole stepped beside Naomi's chair, smiling coldly. Vanessa worked directly under senior management. Beautiful, ambitious, dangerous in the quiet corporate way. Interesting promotion, Vanessa said sweetly. Some women really know how to climb quickly around here. Several employees laughed softly. Naomi forced herself to remain calm. I earned this position, she replied. Vanessa leaned closer. Sure you did. Then Ethan's voice cut through the room sharply. Miss Cole. Silence dropped immediately. Vanessa straightened fast. Ethan looked directly at her. If you have enough free time for gossip, he said calmly, I'll gladly triple your workload. Vanessa's face lost color. Sorry, sir. Ethan's gaze shifted briefly toward Naomi. Only for 1 second. But Naomi felt it completely. He had protected her, publicly, and somehow that terrified her more than his coldness ever had. By Friday afternoon, the entire 23rd floor of Silverline Global had transformed into a battlefield disguised as corporate professionalism. People smiled politely, then whispered viciously once Naomi Carter walked away. Every glance carried suspicion now. The former cleaning employee had somehow become the CEO's visible weakness. And ambitious people hated weakness. Naomi tried ignoring it. She focused on spreadsheets, training reports, operational forecasts, anything that kept her mind away from Ethan Blackwood's impossible presence. But avoiding Ethan had become nearly impossible. Because Ethan no longer acted like a man trying to hide her. That frightened Naomi more each day. Late that afternoon, Marcus Reed approached her desk carrying a digital tablet beneath one arm. Mr. Blackwood needs revised procurement files delivered upstairs, he said professionally. Naomi's stomach tightened immediately. Can someone else take them? Marcus studied her calmly. Probably, he admitted, but he requested you specifically. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. Of course he did. The executive elevator felt colder than usual. By the time she reached Ethan's private office floor, her pulse already hammered against her ribs. She knocked carefully. Come in. Ethan stood near the windows overlooking downtown Houston, while sunset painted the skyline gold and crimson. Without his jacket, the rolled sleeves of his white shirt exposed strong forearms, marked by faded military scars. Naomi noticed them immediately. For some reason, the sight unsettled her deeply. Because scars meant Ethan Blackwood had once bled too. Your files, Naomi said quietly while placing documents onto his desk. Ethan turned slowly. Sit down. Naomi blinked. I should return downstairs. Sit. His tone remained calm, but final. But, reluctantly, Naomi sat across from his desk while Ethan continued watching her silently. The quiet stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Finally, Naomi spoke first. "Why are you helping me?" Ethan leaned against the desk. "You assume I am. You embarrassed Vanessa publicly for insulting me." "She embarrassed herself." Naomi shook her head softly. "People notice things, Mr. Blackwood." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Call me Ethan when we're alone." The correction hit Naomi unexpectedly hard. Too intimate. Too personal. "I don't think that's appropriate," she whispered. Ethan stepped closer slowly. "Neither was standing in the rain after your mother's funeral," he replied. "But you did that anyway." Naomi looked away quickly. Ethan studied her for several seconds, then his voice softened unexpectedly. "How old were you when your father left?" Naomi froze. Nobody asked about her father, not anymore. "8," she answered quietly. Ethan nodded once. "Mine died overseas when I was 13. Naomi looked up immediately. For the first time since meeting Ethan Blackwood, she saw something human inside his expression. Grief recognized grief. The moment lasted only seconds. Then Ethan straightened again. The walls returned instantly. "You should go home," he said. Naomi stood carefully. Before reaching the door, she hesitated. "Thank you," she whispered without turning, "for defending me downstairs." Ethan watched her silently. "You defend people worth defending," he said finally. The words followed Naomi all evening. At home, her tiny apartment suddenly felt impossibly quiet without hospital equipment, medicine bottles, or her mother's coughing echoing through thin walls. Grief hit hardest during silence. Naomi barely slept. By Saturday morning, exhaustion settled heavily behind her eyes. Then another problem arrived. Her landlord, Gerald Whitmore, waited outside her apartment building beside the mailboxes, wearing a stained polo shirt and cheap gold chain. His smile immediately made Naomi uncomfortable. "Morning, sweetheart," he said lazily. Naomi tightened her grip on her bag. "I came for my security deposit," she said carefully. "My lease officially ends Monday." Gerald laughed softly. "Funny thing about deposits," he replied while stepping closer. "Paperwork gets complicated sometimes." Naomi's stomach sank. "The lease clearly says—" "I know what the lease says." His eyes moved slowly over her body. Naomi felt sick instantly. "But maybe we can negotiate another arrangement." She stepped backward immediately. "Don't talk to me like that." Gerald smirked. "Relax. Pretty women survive by being flexible." Then he grabbed her wrist. Naomi reacted instinctively. "Let go of me!" She twisted sharply, trying to pull free. Gerald tightened his grip harder. "Stop acting innocent." A cold voice cut across the hallway. "Take your hand off her." Both turned instantly. Ethan Blackwood stood near the stairwell entrance, wearing dark jeans and a fitted black jacket instead of business clothing. The casual outfit somehow made him look even more dangerous. Gerald released Naomi immediately. "Sir, this isn't what—" Ethan walked forward slowly, calmly. That terrified Gerald more than shouting would have. "You touched her after she told you not to," Ethan said quietly. Gerald laughed nervously. "Just misunderstanding." Ethan stopped directly in front of him. "Men like you always call it misunderstanding afterward." Naomi stared at Ethan in shock. The fury beneath his calm voice felt frighteningly real. Two men appeared suddenly behind Ethan. Private security. Former military by the look of them. Gerald's face lost color immediately. "Sir, please." Ethan didn't blink. "Call Houston Police Department," he told one guard. "Sexual harassment. Attempted assault." Gerald panicked instantly. "Wait, please wait." Naomi finally found her voice. "My deposit," she whispered. Ethan glanced toward her. For 1 second, something softer appeared behind his eyes again, then vanished. He reached inside his jacket and handed Naomi a black bank card. "Take it," he said. Naomi stared at the card. "I don't want your money. It's not charity." "Then what is it?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice lowered. "Protection," he answered simply. Naomi's pulse quickened. The hallway suddenly felt too small, too intimate, too dangerous. "Why do you care what happens to me?" she asked softly. Ethan held her gaze steadily. For several seconds, he looked like a man debating something internally. Then he answered honestly, "I'm still trying to figure that out myself." The confession hit Naomi harder than she expected, because Ethan Blackwood sounded almost frustrated by it. Like caring about her had become an inconvenience he couldn't control. Police sirens echoed faintly outside moments later. Gerald turned pale. Ethan looked toward Naomi again. "You should pack your things," he said quietly. "This apartment isn't safe anymore." Naomi's heartbeat slowed dangerously. "What are you saying?" Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Come stay at my house until you find somewhere better." Naomi stared at him completely speechless. And somewhere deep inside Ethan Blackwood's guarded expression, something dangerous had already begun. Attachment. Naomi Carter spent the entire drive to Ethan Blackwood's estate, staring silently through the passenger window while Houston's evening lights blurred across wet highways. Nothing about this situation felt real. 3 weeks earlier, she had been cleaning executive bathrooms while worrying about unpaid medical bills. Now she sat inside a luxury vehicle beside one of the most powerful men in Texas, and he had just invited her into his home. The silence between them felt heavy, not awkward, dangerous. Ethan drove with one hand resting loosely against the steering wheel, while city lights reflected across his sharp profile. Naomi kept stealing nervous glances toward him, then quickly looking away. Finally she spoke. "This is temporary." Ethan didn't look at her. Obviously. The cold answer stung more than Naomi expected. She folded her arms tightly. "I only accepted because I don't have another option tonight." "You don't need to justify survival to me," Ethan replied quietly. The words settled strangely inside her chest. When they finally reached the Blackwood estate, Naomi stopped breathing for several seconds. The property looked less like a house and more like something politicians inherited from old American dynasties. Tall iron gates, private security, stone architecture glowing beneath warm exterior lights, ancient oak trees swaying gently across enormous grounds. The place felt intimidatingly permanent. Naomi suddenly became painfully aware of her small suitcase sitting in the back seat. Everything she owned barely filled half of it. Inside the mansion, warmth surrounded her immediately. Soft jazz played somewhere distant. Firelight flickered across polished wooden floors. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive candles. An older woman appeared from the hallway carrying folded towels. She stopped immediately upon seeing Naomi. Then her entire face softened. "Lord have mercy," she whispered warmly. "You finally brought somebody home." Ethan sighed heavily. "Angela." The woman ignored him completely and approached Naomi instead. "I'm Angela Brooks," she said kindly. "House manager around here for 15 years. Naomi smiled nervously. "Naomi Carter." Angela squeezed her hand gently. "Sweetheart, you look exhausted." The simple kindness nearly broke Naomi's composure instantly. Ethan noticed. His jaw tightened slightly. "Prepare the East Guest Suite," he told Angela quietly. Angela blinked once, then looked between them slowly. Something curious flickered inside her expression. "The guest suite," she repeated carefully. "Yes." Angela nodded politely. But Naomi sensed the older woman clearly understood something Ethan wasn't saying aloud. The guest suite overlooked the estate gardens, large windows, cream-colored walls, fresh flowers beside the bed. Everything looked elegant enough for a luxury hotel. Naomi stood awkwardly near the doorway while Angela unpacked towels inside the bathroom. "You don't need to be nervous here," Angela said softly without looking up. Naomi swallowed. "I don't belong somewhere like this." Angela finally turned toward her. "Baby, peace belongs wherever exhausted people find it." The words stayed with Naomi long after Angela left. An hour later, Naomi stood alone beside the massive bathroom mirror, wearing borrowed silk pajamas Angela insisted she try. For the first time in months, she looked cared for. That realization hurt unexpectedly. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Naomi opened the door carefully. Ethan stood outside, holding a small tray. Soup, tea, medication. Naomi blinked in shock. "You brought food?" Ethan looked almost annoyed by the question. "You barely ate today." Naomi stepped aside slowly. Ethan entered the room with the cautious energy of a man unfamiliar with comforting people. He placed the tray beside her bed, then stood awkwardly afterward. Neither knew what to say. Finally, Naomi spoke carefully. "Thank you." Ethan nodded once. Silence stretched again. Then his eyes drifted briefly toward her bare legs beneath the oversized pajama shirt. Naomi noticed immediately. Heat rushed across her skin. Ethan looked away first. The tiny moment somehow felt more intimate than their entire night together. "You should rest," he said quietly. Naomi hesitated. "Ethan," he looked back toward her. "What?" Naomi lowered her eyes. "Why are you being kind now?" Ethan stared at her silently for several seconds. Then he answered with unsettling honesty. "I don't know how not to protect things once they become important to me." Naomi's heartbeat stopped briefly. Important. The word echoed through the room dangerously. Before she could answer, Ethan stepped backward toward the door. "Good night, Naomi." He left immediately afterward. Naomi barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed Ethan's voice inside her mind. "Important to me." By morning, the estate already buzzed with quiet activity. Angela supervised kitchen staff downstairs while security teams rotated shifts near the gates. Naomi entered the breakfast room carefully, feeling completely out of place. Then she saw Ethan. He sat at the long dining table, reading financial reports beside black coffee. Sharp suit, perfect posture, cold expression restored completely. Like last night's softness never happened. Naomi slowed immediately. Ethan looked up. "Sit down," he said calmly. Naomi obeyed reluctantly. Angela appeared instantly, carrying fresh pancakes and fruit. "You need real food," Angela announced. Naomi laughed softly for the first time in weeks. The sound surprised everyone, including Ethan. His eyes lifted slowly toward her face, and for one brief second, Naomi watched Ethan Blackwood become completely still. Because her laugh changed her entire appearance. It made grief loosen, made exhaustion disappear, made her beautiful in a way that felt painfully genuine. Ethan looked away first. Too late. Naomi had already noticed. The morning shattered moments later when a glamorous brunette entered the dining room, wearing designer clothing and dangerous confidence. Victoria Sinclair, Silverline Global's executive legal director, and according to every business magazine in Texas, Ethan Blackwood's rumored future wife. Victoria stopped instantly after seeing Naomi seated beside Ethan. The silence became sharp enough to cut skin. "Interesting," Victoria said smoothly. Her eyes moved slowly over Naomi. Assessing, judging, threatening. Ethan closed his file calmly. "Why are you here this early?" Victoria smiled without warmth. "Your grandmother invited me for brunch next weekend." Her eyes returned toward Naomi. "Though apparently you've already started entertaining guests yourself." Naomi stood immediately. "I should leave." "Sit down," Ethan said sharply. Victoria's smile faded slightly. She had expected embarrassment, not protection. "Who's she?" Victoria asked directly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Someone under my protection." The answer changed everything. Naomi felt it instantly. So did Victoria, because powerful men did not casually protect women unless emotions had already entered the situation. Victoria studied Naomi much more carefully now, like identifying a new enemy. Then she smiled again, this time colder. "Well," she said softly, "Houston corporate society should find this fascinating." After she left, Naomi looked toward Ethan nervously. "You didn't need to say that." Ethan continued drinking coffee calmly. "Yes," he replied quietly. "I did." Outside the estate windows, dark storm clouds gathered over Houston again. And somewhere deep inside Naomi Carter's chest, fear began mixing dangerously with something far more complicated. Houston corporate society moved faster than wildfire once gossip smelled expensive. By Monday morning, rumors about Ethan Blackwood and Naomi Carter had already spread through executive circles, private country clubs, and luxury charity boards across the city. Nobody knew the full story. That made people invent worse versions. Naomi felt the tension immediately when she entered Silverline Global beside Ethan. Conversation stopped. Elevator doors opened suspiciously slowly. Employees stared openly now, not because Naomi looked ashamed, because Ethan looked protective. And that changed everything. The executive elevator ride remained silent until Ethan suddenly spoke. "Ignore them." Naomi folded her arms tightly. "Easy for you to say. Nobody questions your reputation." Ethan glanced toward her calmly. "People have questioned my reputation for years. I just stopped caring." Naomi shook her head softly. "Power lets you survive scandal differently." The elevator doors opened before Ethan answered, but his expression suggested he understood exactly what she meant. By noon, Naomi already regretted coming to work. Whispers followed her everywhere. Women studied her clothes critically. Men looked too curious. Every hallway felt hostile. Then Victoria Sinclair arrived. The legal director moved through the office like expensive perfume wrapped around sharp intelligence. Beautiful, controlled, dangerous. She stopped directly beside Naomi's desk, carrying a leather portfolio. "Miss Carter," Victoria said smoothly. Naomi looked up carefully. "Good afternoon." Victoria smiled politely enough for nearby employees to believe the interaction friendly. Only Naomi noticed the coldness beneath it. "I wanted to personally welcome you to Silverline Corporate Operations," Victoria continued, "though your transition from maintenance staff to executive attention has certainly been impressive." Several nearby workers immediately pretended not to listen. Naomi forced herself to remain calm. "I earned my position." Victoria tilted her head slightly. "I'm sure that's what you tell yourself." The insult landed quietly, professionally. That somehow made it worse. Before Naomi could answer, another voice interrupted. "Problem here." Derek Lawson approached, carrying coffee and financial reports beneath one arm. Victoria looked him over dismissively. "Not at all." Derek smiled pleasantly. "Good, because Naomi's one of the smartest analysts in training right now. I'd hate seeing office politics distract from actual talent." Victoria's eyes sharpened immediately. She looked between them carefully, then smiled again. "How protective." Her voice lowered slightly. "Careful, Derek. Ethan Blackwood doesn't enjoy competition." Naomi's stomach tightened. Victoria walked away gracefully afterward, but the warning remained hanging heavily in the air. Derek looked toward Naomi. "You okay?" Naomi nodded too quickly. "Fine." Derek studied her face. "You're definitely not fine." The kindness in his voice almost broke her composure again. Naomi lowered her eyes. "Everything feels complicated lately." Derek hesitated briefly, then he said something unexpected. "You don't look happy around him." Naomi froze. "What?" "Ethan Blackwood," Derek clarified quietly. "Every time he's near you, you look nervous instead of safe." Naomi opened her mouth, then closed it again, because she didn't know the answer herself. That evening, Ethan returned home later than usual, carrying visible frustration beneath his calm exterior. Angela noticed immediately. "Board trouble?" she asked while pouring bourbon into a crystal glass. Ethan loosened his tie sharply. "Victoria started gossiping publicly today." Angela raised one eyebrow. "And you care because?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. That silence alone told Angela everything. The older woman smiled knowingly. "You like her?" Ethan scoffed softly. "That's not the issue." Angela laughed. "Baby, when powerful men start protecting women publicly, feelings already entered the room hours earlier." Ethan drank the bourbon quietly, then his eyes shifted toward the staircase where Naomi's bedroom waited upstairs. Angela noticed that too. "Careful," she warned gently. "Women like Naomi don't survive heartbreak easily." Ethan's jaw tightened. Neither do men like him, but he didn't say that aloud. Upstairs, Naomi stood alone beside her bedroom window, watching rain slide slowly down the glass. Her body had felt strange all week. Exhaustion, dizziness, nausea arriving unexpectedly during meetings. At first she blamed stress, then fear began whispering quietly beneath logic. Her period was late. Very late. Naomi closed her eyes tightly. No, impossible. The pills Ethan gave her that morning after the executive suite had been birth control, hadn't they? Her stomach twisted painfully. By Wednesday morning, Naomi finally scheduled a private doctor's appointment downtown. She lied to HR about migraines. Derek offered driving her. Naomi refused immediately. The hospital waiting room smelled sharply of antiseptic and anxiety. When the nurse finally called her name, Naomi's hands already trembled. Dr. Daniel Mercer looked younger than expected. Calm eyes, professional voice, gentle energy that made nervous patients breathe easier. He reviewed Naomi's lab results quietly, then looked up. "Miss Carter," he said carefully, "you're pregnant." The room went silent. Naomi stared at him blankly. "No," she whispered immediately. "That's impossible." Dr. Mercer remained calm. "The results are very clear." Naomi gripped the chair tightly. "I took birth control pills." The doctor's expression shifted slightly. "Do you remember the medication name?" Naomi froze. She realized something terrifying. She had never actually checked. Ethan handed her pills. She swallowed them automatically. Fear rushed through her chest violently. "I don't know," she admitted weakly. Dr. Mercer studied her face carefully. Then he asked quietly, "Did you physically see the packaging yourself?" Naomi's breathing became uneven. "No." The doctor leaned back slowly. "Miss Carter, based on your blood work, it's possible you never took contraceptives at all." The words crashed through Naomi like cold water. "What are you saying?" "Some vitamin supplements resemble birth control packaging," Dr. Mercer explained carefully. "Mistakes happen more often than people realize." Naomi's entire body went cold. Vitamins, not contraception. Her mind immediately returned to Ethan standing beside the bed that morning. Cold expression, sharp eyes. "Take it." Naomi pressed trembling fingers against her mouth. "Oh my God." Tears filled her eyes instantly. Dr. Mercer handed her tissues quietly. "Do you want to continue the pregnancy?" Naomi looked down helplessly. Her life already felt unstable. Her mother was gone. Her career barely started, and Ethan Blackwood complicated every breath she took. A baby would destroy everything. "I can't do this," she whispered brokenly. "I need an abortion." Dr. Mercer nodded professionally. "I can schedule the procedure Sunday morning, but you should understand the medical risks first." Naomi barely heard him afterward. Her mind spiraled uncontrollably. Pregnant, by Ethan, and somehow, impossibly, the thought hurting most wasn't fear. It was realizing Ethan might never believe she hadn't planned this. Naomi Carter left the hospital feeling like the ground beneath Houston had shifted permanently. Traffic moved normally. People crossed sidewalks carrying coffee. Life continued. Meanwhile, her entire future had changed inside one sterile doctor's office. Pregnant, by Ethan Blackwood. The realization sat heavily inside her chest while cold November wind pushed against downtown streets. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself and walked slowly toward the parking garage. Her mind replayed de Mercer's words repeatedly. "It's possible you never took contraceptives at all." Naomi stopped beside a crosswalk suddenly. A dangerous thought entered her mind. What if Ethan did it intentionally? The idea terrified her immediately. No. Ethan Blackwood was controlling. Cold, possessive even, but calculating pregnancy through deception felt monstrous. And somewhere deep down, Naomi didn't believe he was monstrous. Complicated, lonely, damaged. Yes, but not evil. Still, fear followed her all afternoon. By evening, Naomi sat alone inside a quiet coffee shop, staring blankly at the abortion appointment paperwork, resting beside untouched tea. Sunday morning, one signature would erase everything. Her phone vibrated unexpectedly. Ethan Blackwood. Naomi stared at the screen several seconds before answering. "Hello? Where are you?" His voice sounded sharper than usual. Naomi swallowed carefully. "Out." Silence. Then Ethan spoke again. "Marcus said you left work sick." Naomi closed her eyes briefly. Of course he knew. "I'm fine." Ethan exhaled slowly. "You're a terrible liar." The strange familiarity in his tone hurt unexpectedly. Naomi looked toward the rain outside the coffee shop windows. "I needed time alone." Another pause. Then Ethan's voice lowered. "Send me your location." Naomi stiffened immediately. "Why?" "Because Houston isn't safe after dark, and you're sitting somewhere alone, pretending everything's normal." His tone hardened slightly. "Location, Naomi." Part of her wanted refusing. Another part suddenly felt exhausted from fighting every single person who tried caring about her. 2 minutes later, Ethan entered the coffee shop wearing a dark wool coat, with rainwater still clinging lightly to his shoulders. Several women looked toward him instantly. Ethan ignored everyone except Naomi. He slid into the seat across from her and studied her face carefully. "You look pale." Naomi forced a weak smile. "Long day." Ethan's eyes dropped toward the paperwork beside her tea. Before Naomi could stop him, he picked it up. The color slowly disappeared from his expression. Abortion consultation. Silence crashed between them. Naomi's pulse hammered violently. Ethan looked up slowly. His voice became dangerously quiet. "Explain this." Naomi's throat tightened. "I found out today." Ethan stared at her. Understanding hit instantly. Pregnancy. His jaw flexed sharply. "How far along?" "Almost 7 weeks." Ethan leaned back slowly, like the information physically struck him. For the first time since Naomi met him, Ethan Blackwood looked completely shaken. Not angry, not cold, unsteady. Naomi's chest hurt watching it. "I didn't plan this," she whispered quickly. "I swear to God." Ethan remained silent several seconds, then he asked quietly, "The pills?" Naomi nodded weakly. They weren't birth control. Something changed behind Ethan's eyes immediately. Not suspicion, realization. He looked genuinely horrified. "Jesus Christ," he muttered softly. Naomi studied him carefully, and suddenly she understood. Ethan hadn't known either. The mistake devastated him too. That realization softened something painful inside her chest. Ethan pressed one hand against his mouth briefly while processing everything. Then his eyes returned toward the paperwork. "You're scheduling an abortion." Naomi looked down. "I don't know what else to do." Ethan's voice dropped lower. "Do you want it?" The question shattered her completely, because nobody else had asked what she wanted, only what made sense, what solved problems, what protected reputations. Naomi's eyes filled instantly. "I don't know," she whispered honestly. The vulnerability in her voice hit Ethan visibly. He stared at her trembling hands resting against the table. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan reached across the table slowly and covered Naomi's shaking fingers with his own. Warm, steady, protective. Naomi stopped breathing. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said quietly. The gentleness in his voice nearly destroyed her composure. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. Ethan looked genuinely angry seeing them. Not at her, at himself, at the situation, at life. "I failed you," he said suddenly. Naomi blinked in confusion. "What?" Ethan held her gaze steadily. "That morning in my suite. I should have checked the medication before giving it to you." His jaw tightened painfully. "You trusted me, and I failed you." Naomi stared at him speechlessly. Powerful men rarely apologized. Ethan Blackwood looked almost haunted by guilt. The realization changed something fundamental between them. Not because the pregnancy solved their problems, because Ethan finally sounded human. Outside, rain hammered harder against the windows. Inside the coffee shop, Ethan suddenly made a decision. "You're not going to that appointment alone Sunday," he said firmly. Naomi's heart skipped. "Ethan, whatever decision you make," he interrupted quietly, "you won't face it alone anymore." The promise settled deeply inside her chest, dangerously deeply. Naomi looked away quickly because her emotions suddenly felt impossible to control. Then another voice interrupted. "Well, this explains a lot." Both turned instantly. Victoria Sinclair stood near their table, holding shopping bags and cold amusement. Naomi's stomach dropped. Victoria's sharp eyes moved slowly from Ethan's hand, covering Naomi's fingers, to the abortion paperwork, then back toward Naomi's pale face. Understanding flashed immediately. Victoria smiled slowly, cruelly. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You trapped America's favorite billionaire. Impressive work for a former janitor." Ethan stood instantly. The entire atmosphere inside the coffee shop shifted. Cold, dangerous, lethal. Victoria noticed immediately, but she smiled anyway. "Did I hit a nerve?" Ethan's voice became terrifyingly calm. "Leave." Victoria crossed her arms. "You really ruined your life for this girl?" Naomi flinched visibly. Ethan noticed. That changed everything. He stepped closer toward Victoria slowly. "Listen carefully," he said quietly. "You will never speak about Naomi that way again." Victoria laughed bitterly. "You're defending her publicly now." Ethan didn't blink. "I'm defending the mother of my child." The entire coffee shop went silent. Naomi's breath caught sharply. Victoria's face lost color instantly because Ethan Blackwood had just claimed Naomi Carter openly, without hesitation, without shame. And suddenly everyone inside that coffee shop understood something before Naomi fully did herself. Ethan Blackwood was already in love with her. The silence inside the coffee shop felt radioactive after Ethan Blackwood's words, "Mother of my child." Naomi sat frozen while every customer nearby pretended not to stare openly. Victoria Sinclair looked like someone had slapped her publicly. Her pride cracked first, then her anger followed. "You're serious," she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The way he stood beside Naomi already revealed everything. Protective, possessive, completely unashamed. Victoria laughed once bitterly. "After everything your family built, this is the woman you choose?" Naomi lowered her eyes immediately. The insult landed exactly where Victoria intended. Ethan noticed. His expression hardened dangerously. "Leave now," he said quietly. Victoria stared at him several long seconds, then her gaze shifted toward Naomi again, this time colder. "You think this ends happily?" she asked softly. "Men like Ethan Blackwood don't stay emotionally loyal forever. They get bored eventually." Naomi's chest tightened painfully, because part of her feared exactly that. Victoria smiled faintly after noticing. She had successfully planted doubt. Then she walked away gracefully into the rain. The coffee shop remained silent afterward. Naomi stared down at the table, unable to breathe normally. Ethan sat back across from her slowly. "Look at me." Naomi shook her head immediately. "I can't." "Naomi," his voice softened. Reluctantly, she looked up. Ethan studied her face carefully. "Don't let people like Victoria define your value." Naomi laughed weakly through tears. "Easy for you to say." "No," Ethan replied quietly. "Not easy. I spent years letting people define mine too." The honesty surprised her again. Naomi wiped her cheeks quickly. "You really embarrassed yourself publicly tonight." Something unexpected happened then. Ethan smiled, a real smile, small, crooked, dangerously attractive. "Good," he said softly. Maybe Houston needed the shock. Naomi stared at him speechlessly. The expression transformed his entire face, made him younger somehow, less untouchable, more human. Her heartbeat betrayed her instantly. Ethan noticed. The realization changed the atmosphere between them immediately. Thicker, warmer, far too intimate. Naomi looked away first. That night, Ethan drove them home through heavy rain while soft jazz played quietly through the vehicle speakers. For once, silence between them felt peaceful instead of dangerous. Until Naomi suddenly whispered, "What if I'm not good at this?" Ethan glanced toward her briefly. "Good at what?" Naomi swallowed carefully. "Being somebody important to another person again." The vulnerability inside her voice hit Ethan visibly. He tightened one hand against the steering wheel. "Who made you believe love works like performance?" Naomi stared through rain-covered windows. "Life," she answered honestly. Ethan didn't speak afterward, but when they reached the estate, he waited until Naomi safely entered the house before driving toward the garage. Like watching her disappear inside somehow mattered. Over the next week, everything changed. Ethan stopped pretending Naomi existed temporarily. He checked whether she ate lunch, texted asking if she reached work safely, brought home ginger tea when morning sickness became unbearable. Tiny things, domestic things, dangerously intimate things. And Naomi slowly realized something terrifying. She had started waiting for his messages. Meanwhile, Houston gossip worsened daily. Business blogs published blurry photos of Ethan leaving restaurants beside Naomi. Private forums discussed pregnancy rumors. Corporate wives whispered during charity events. Silverline employees watched Naomi constantly now, some with curiosity, others with resentment. Then Friday arrived, and everything exploded publicly. Silverline Global hosted its annual Veterans Charity Gala inside one of Houston's luxury downtown hotels. Politicians attended, military officers, investors, television cameras. Naomi planned avoiding the event completely, until Ethan entered her office that afternoon. Dark suit, sharp eyes, dangerous confidence. Every employee nearby immediately stopped pretending to work. Ethan looked directly at Naomi. "You're coming tonight." Naomi blinked. "Absolutely not." "Yes." "Ethan, half of Texas already thinks I manipulated you somehow." He stepped closer calmly. "Then let them see who you actually are." Naomi lowered her voice nervously. "You don't understand what public humiliation feels like for women without power." Ethan's expression changed subtly. "Maybe not," he admitted quietly, "but I understand what fear looks like." Naomi stared at him silently. Then Ethan said the one thing she couldn't fight. "You won't face them alone." 3 hours later, Naomi stood inside her bedroom at the Blackwood estate, wearing a midnight blue gown Angela personally selected. Elegant, simple, beautiful without trying too hard. Naomi barely recognized herself. Angela adjusted the final strap gently. "That man downstairs is already breathing differently tonight," she whispered knowingly. Naomi's cheeks warmed immediately. Before she could answer, a knock sounded against the bedroom door. "Ethan." Angela smiled wickedly before opening it. Then she walked away immediately, leaving them alone. Ethan entered slowly and stopped moving completely. Naomi's heartbeat stumbled because Ethan Blackwood looked genuinely speechless. His eyes moved across her face, her hair, the soft curve of her shoulders beneath dark blue silk. Then back toward her eyes. The silence became unbearably intimate. Finally, Ethan exhaled softly. "Jesus Christ." Naomi laughed nervously. "That's not exactly a compliment." Ethan stepped closer. "It's the only thing my brain produced." His voice lowered. "You look beautiful." The sincerity behind the words almost destroyed her composure instantly. No man had ever looked at Naomi Carter that way before, like beauty physically affected him, like she mattered. At the gala, cameras flashed continuously once Ethan entered the ballroom beside Naomi. Conversations stopped instantly. Every powerful person in Houston watched them. Ethan noticed Naomi stiffening beside him. Without hesitation, he placed one hand gently against her lower back. Protective, steady, claiming her publicly again. The gesture sent whispers racing through the ballroom. Naomi tried breathing normally. Then a reporter approached. "Mr. Blackwood," the woman asked carefully, "are recent rumors regarding your relationship accurate?" Naomi's stomach dropped. Ethan didn't even blink. "Which rumors?" The reporter hesitated. "That Miss Carter is carrying your child." The ballroom became silent enough to hear champagne glasses touching. Naomi stopped breathing entirely. Ethan looked toward her first. Not the cameras, not the crowd, her. Then he answered calmly, "Yes." Shock exploded quietly through the ballroom. Camera flashes intensified immediately, but Ethan continued speaking. "And before anyone asks another disrespectful question, understand something clearly." His arm tightened slightly around Naomi's waist. "Naomi Carter will be treated with respect from this moment forward." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved, because Ethan Blackwood had just declared war on anyone planning humiliating the woman beside him. Then something unexpected happened. Naomi looked up at him, and for the first time since entering his life, she stopped looking afraid. She looked proud standing beside him. The realization hit Ethan harder than any business victory ever had, because in that exact moment, Ethan Blackwood understood something terrifying. He didn't just care about Naomi Carter anymore, he loved her enough to burn entire worlds protecting her. The morning after the gala felt unreal. Houston news stations replayed Ethan Blackwood's public declaration every hour. Business blogs exploded. Social media turned Naomi Carter into the most discussed woman in Texas overnight. Some people called her lucky, others called her manipulative, most simply envied her. Naomi sat quietly inside the Blackwood estate kitchen, wearing one of Ethan's oversized sweaters while staring blankly at her phone. Thousands of comments, photos, rumors, speculation. Angela placed fresh tea beside her gently. "Stop reading them," she warned softly. Naomi exhaled shakily. "They're destroying me online." Angela shook her head. "Baby, strangers online destroy everybody eventually. Rich women, poor women, saints, mothers, doesn't matter." She squeezed Naomi's shoulder carefully. "What matters is who protects your peace afterward." Naomi looked toward the doorway automatically. Ethan wasn't home yet. He had left before sunrise for emergency investor meetings caused by the media chaos. Still, somehow the house felt full of him anyway. His coffee mug remained beside the sink. His jacket still hung across the dining chair. His presence lingered everywhere now. That realization scared Naomi more than public gossip, because she had started feeling emotionally safe around Ethan Blackwood. And emotionally safe, people could break your heart permanently. At Silverline Global, the atmosphere had become unbearable. Executives suddenly treated Naomi with exaggerated politeness. Employees stopped insulting her publicly. But resentment deepened quietly beneath every interaction, especially from men who once ignored her completely. During lunch break, Derek Lawson found Naomi sitting alone on the rooftop terrace, staring toward downtown Houston. He approached carefully, carrying coffee. "Mind if I sit?" Naomi managed a tired smile. "You already did." Derek laughed softly before settling beside her. For several minutes they simply watched traffic move below. Then Derek spoke quietly. "You love him." Naomi stiffened immediately. "What?" "Ethan." Derek looked toward her calmly. "You look terrified every time somebody mentions his name. That's usually love or severe emotional damage." Naomi laughed weakly despite herself. "Maybe both." Derek studied her face carefully. "Does he make you happy?" The question hurt unexpectedly, because Naomi didn't know how answering honestly without betraying herself. Finally, she whispered, "He makes me feel seen." Derek looked away toward the skyline. Something sad flickered briefly across his expression, then he smiled gently. "That's rare." Naomi suddenly realized something. "You liked me in college, didn't you?" Derek laughed softly. "Liked you, Naomi? I nearly failed economics because I spent entire lectures staring at you." Her cheeks warmed instantly. Derek shook his head, smiling. "Relax. I'm not confessing tragic love before dramatic rain starts falling." His voice softened slightly. "I just want you careful. Men like Ethan Blackwood aren't trained for ordinary relationships." Naomi looked down quietly. "Neither am I anymore." That evening, Ethan returned home exhausted. His tie hung loose. Dark circles shadowed beneath his eyes. The second he entered the kitchen, his gaze found Naomi automatically, like instinct. Naomi noticed, so did Angela. The older woman hid a knowing smile before disappearing intentionally toward another room, leaving them alone. Ethan loosened one cuff slowly. "How bad was today?" Naomi shrugged weakly. "I've apparently become public enemy #1 among wealthy Houston women." Ethan crossed the kitchen quietly, then stopped directly beside her chair. "Look at me." Naomi obeyed reluctantly. Ethan studied her face carefully. "Did anybody disrespect you directly?" The dangerous calmness inside his voice startled her. Naomi shook her head quickly. "No." Ethan relaxed slightly. Then his eyes drifted toward the untouched dinner plate beside her. "You didn't eat." Naomi sighed softly. "Morning sickness again." Without another word, Ethan rolled up his sleeves and walked toward the stove. Naomi blinked in confusion. "What are you doing?" "Cooking." She stared openly now. "You cook?" Ethan glanced back briefly. "Navy intelligence taught survival skills." A pause. "And my mother taught me pancakes before she died." The quiet vulnerability beneath the sentence settled deeply between them. Naomi watched silently while Ethan moved confidently around the kitchen, preparing simple food. Comfort food, warm food, food made carefully for her. The domestic intimacy nearly overwhelmed her. 20 minutes later, Ethan placed fresh toast and soup before Naomi, before sitting across from her. She took one cautious bite, then another. The nausea eased slightly. Ethan noticed immediately. His shoulders relaxed almost invisibly. Naomi stared at him carefully. "Why do you look relieved?" Ethan leaned back slowly. "Because you've barely eaten all week." and it's making me insane." The honesty stunned her again. Naomi lowered her spoon quietly. "Ethan?" He looked up. Her voice trembled slightly. "Why are you trying so hard?" Silence filled the kitchen. Then Ethan answered with terrifying sincerity, "Because losing you already feels unbearable." Naomi's breath caught sharply. The confession landed directly against her heart. Before she could respond, Ethan stood suddenly and walked toward the windows like the admission physically unsettled him. Rain moved softly across the glass outside. Houston looked blurred beneath storm clouds. Naomi watched his broad shoulders tense beneath white dress fabric. Then she realized something painful. Ethan Blackwood looked afraid, not of business, not of scandal, of her, or more specifically, of needing her. The realization changed everything inside Naomi. Slowly, she stood and crossed the kitchen quietly. Ethan turned slightly once he sensed her near him. Neither spoke. The storm outside deepened. Inside the dim kitchen light, Naomi reached toward his face carefully. Her fingers brushed his jaw gently. Ethan stopped breathing. "You're not losing me," she whispered. The words shattered whatever restraint Ethan still possessed. He pulled her against him instantly, not aggressively, desperately, like a man starving emotionally after years of isolation. Then he kissed her, slowly this time, tenderly. Nothing like the first night inside the executive suite. This kiss carried fear, need, relief, love powerful enough to terrify both of them. Naomi melted against him immediately. One of Ethan's hands cradled the back of her neck carefully while the other rested protectively against her stomach. Their unborn child, their impossible future. Everything suddenly felt real. When they finally pulled apart, Naomi's forehead rested lightly against his chest while both struggled breathing normally. Then Ethan whispered the one thing Naomi never expected hearing from him. "Marry me." Naomi froze completely. Ethan looked down toward her with terrifying seriousness. "Not because of the baby," he said quietly, "because every day without you already feels wrong." Tears filled Naomi's eyes instantly, not from fear anymore, from hope, and hope felt far more dangerous. Naomi Carter stood frozen inside Ethan Blackwood's arms while rain hammered softly against the kitchen windows. "Marry me." The words echoed through her chest like something fragile and impossible. Ethan had not whispered them carelessly, not like a billionaire solving inconvenience, not like a man trapped by scandal. He sounded terrified, which somehow made the proposal feel painfully real. Naomi slowly lifted her eyes toward him. Ethan's face remained serious. No arrogance, no manipulation, just raw honesty sitting heavily behind dark, tired eyes. "Say something," he whispered. Naomi laughed shakily through tears. "You picked the most emotionally overwhelming moment possible." A small smile touched Ethan's mouth briefly, then disappeared, because he genuinely needed her answer. Naomi touched his chest carefully. Beneath her palm, his heartbeat felt fast, unsteady, human. That realization finally broke the last wall inside her. "Yes," she whispered softly. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Like relief physically weakened him, then he kissed her forehead gently. Not possessively. Reverently. The next morning, sunlight finally returned to Houston after nearly 2 weeks of storms. The Blackwood estate buzzed with controlled chaos immediately after Ethan announced the engagement. Angela cried openly. Marcus looked mildly traumatized by emotional happiness. And Ethan's grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood, arrived before noon carrying enough champagne to celebrate political elections. Naomi met Eleanor for the first time inside the estate garden. Elegant silver hair, sharp blue eyes, old Southern wealth wrapped around intimidating intelligence. The older woman studied Naomi carefully for several long seconds, then smiled slowly. "So you're the woman who finally humbled Ethan." Eleanor sounded deeply satisfied. "I've been praying for this miracle since 2009. Naomi blinked in surprise. Ethan sighed heavily beside her. "Grandmother." Eleanor ignored him completely. She reached toward Naomi's face gently. "Child, anybody capable of softening this stubborn man deserves national recognition." Naomi laughed unexpectedly. Ethan stared at her immediately. There it was again. That smile, that laugh, the expressions Ethan Blackwood had unconsciously become addicted to. 3 weeks later, the wedding took place privately beside Galveston Beach during sunset. No television cameras, no political networking, no corporate spectacle, only close family, trusted friends, and waves moving quietly against Texas sand. Naomi wore simple ivory silk that moved softly in the ocean wind. Ethan wore a dark charcoal suit while staring at her like he still couldn't believe she existed. The ceremony itself remained small but emotionally devastating, especially when Ethan spoke his vows. His voice stayed calm initially, then cracked slightly halfway through. "I spent years believing control was strength," he admitted quietly while holding Naomi's hands. "Then you entered my life carrying grief and exhaustion and impossible courage. And somehow you taught me vulnerability isn't weakness when love exists beside it." Naomi's eyes filled instantly. Several guests cried openly, even Marcus looked suspiciously emotional. Then Naomi spoke. Her voice trembled softly beneath ocean wind. "My entire life, survival felt temporary, like happiness belonged to other people with safer lives and stronger families." She squeezed Ethan's hands carefully. "Then you looked at me when I felt invisible. You stayed when things became difficult, and you loved me before I fully remembered how loving myself felt again." Ethan stopped breathing normally. By the time they exchanged rings, sunset painted the Gulf Coast gold and crimson. And for the first time since childhood, Naomi Carter felt completely safe. Not because life became perfect, because she no longer carried it alone. Months later, winter settled softly across Houston. Christmas lights covered the Blackwood estate, while jazz music drifted warmly through decorated hallways. Naomi sat beside the fireplace wrapped in blankets, with one hand resting against her very pregnant stomach. Twins, 2 boys, healthy, strong. Ethan remained impossibly protective now. He attended every appointment, cancelled meetings for ultrasounds, argued personally with chefs about Naomi's nutrition, and panicked whenever she sneezed too hard. "You're overreacting," Naomi laughed one evening. Ethan looked genuinely offended. "You're carrying my entire emotional stability inside your body right now. I'm reacting appropriately." Naomi nearly cried laughing. Their sons arrived during a thunderstorm in early March. 6 exhausting hours. One terrified billionaire, and enough emotional breakdowns from Ethan to embarrass military veterans. When the first baby cried loudly across the delivery room, Ethan visibly shattered. Tears filled his eyes instantly. Naomi had never seen anything more beautiful. Then the second baby arrived minutes later, and Ethan Blackwood openly cried beside her hospital bed while holding both newborn sons carefully against his chest. "They look like you," Naomi whispered weakly. Ethan shook his head immediately. Thank God, years later, people across Houston still discussed Ethan Blackwood's dramatic transformation. The ruthless billionaire became softer, kinder, more human. Not in business. Silverline Global remained brutally successful, but privately, Ethan changed completely. Because love had reached places inside him, military discipline and corporate power never could. As for Naomi, she eventually led Silverline's National Charitable Foundation, focused on healthcare support for struggling families, especially single mothers, especially daughters carrying impossible burdens alone. One rainy evening, nearly 5 years after their wedding, Naomi stood quietly beside the large estate windows, watching storms move across Houston again. Ethan approached silently behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist automatically, comfortingly, familiar. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Naomi smiled gently. "The first night we met." Ethan groaned dramatically. "Please don't remind me. I behaved like emotionally constipated corporate trash." Naomi laughed warmly. "You really did." Ethan kissed her temple lightly, "And somehow you loved me anyway." Naomi turned inside his arms slowly, then touched his face carefully the same way she had years earlier inside that kitchen. "No," she whispered. "I loved the man hidden underneath everything painful." Ethan's expression softened immediately. Outside, thunder rolled gently across Houston's skies. Inside, their sons laughed loudly somewhere upstairs while life moved warmly around them. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, and after everything both survived, real love felt more valuable than perfection ever could. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.